Good morning, everybody. A huge welcome from the Faculty of Grad Studies. I'm Cheryl Van Dalen Smith, Associate Dean Academic. Really thrilled to welcome Dr. Karen Campbell back to our broad work in supporting grad students across York University. Thrilled to see lots of people coming into this webinar. This is the third of a series of workshops around qualitative research and qualitative analysis. And this one is called From Coding and Beyond, Reflexive Thematic Analysis in Action. Just an FYI for any of the grad scholars in our audience that weren't able to be present for the first and second workshop, we have recorded them and they are available on our YouTube channel. And probably later on, Kim will pop that into the chat for you. The structure today is going to be a presentation. There's some interaction with Dr. Campbell, and we're going to be recording that. And then when that formal part is done, we're going to stop recording, and then there can be more free kind of Q&A, if you like, where you won't be recorded. And so just watch for that. I'll try and tell you what's happening all along the way. We'll be going until 12:15. It's now, 11:02. So just know that we like to stick to time because everyone's super busy. So for folks who don't know our Karen Campbell, you will know her. She's an up-and-comer at York University and an expert in qualitative research, someone that I go to, and I ask my students to go to her often around her expertise. She's a assistant professor in the School of Nursing, where I'm also situated here at York. Her program of research focuses on the intersections of women's health with physical and social geographies. Too cool. She's taught grad level courses in qualitative research and conducted multiple applied, keyword there, qualitative research projects using a broad range of study designs and approaches. And so with that, I'm going to pass to Dr. Campbell, to our Karen, to walk us through her third webinar. And again, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Dr. Van Smith. It is so wonderful to be here, and thank you all for taking this time. I just wanted to start by recognizing that I am on the traditional lands of the the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nations, but that we all come together through York University. So we pay our respects and our gratitude towards those who have caretaken this space that we come together through, and that's the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron Métis, and lots of other First Nations people who have now come to use this space. So that's where I am, and this is what I'm going to do today. So hopefully you can see my screen okay. And today I'm going to talk about reflexive thematic analysis, and I actually want to put some of the action around it so that you can have a sense or leave with a sense of, okay, what do I actually do now, beyond just knowing theoretically what it means. See if I can move my slides. There we go. So the plan today is to talk a little bit about reflexive thematic analysis, outline Braun and Clarke's, and it is pronounced Braun, and Clarke always has an E, but Braun and Clarke's 6 stages of reflexive thematic analysis, and then we'll have a little question and answer period like Cheryl mentioned. Um, Most of the information that I am bringing to you today is from this paper, Reflexive Thematic Analysis for Applied Qualitative Health Research. And I happen to do applied qualitative health research, but all of this is applicable to applied qualitative research. And if you weren't at the other two webinars or either of them, applied qualitative work or applied qualitative research is research that tends to be discipline specific, that it's research that has kind of a timely outcome. So something that we can do in a shorter period of time that doesn't tend to have the theoretical baggage of some of the bigger qualitative traditions like phenomenology, ethnography, and grounded theory, which are really important, but sometimes do something different than what we're looking to do. So this is where it comes from. It's a really popular paper. There's lots of downloads on this paper. It's probably my most prolific paper. This is just a QR code to it. So if you want to click on, you can't click on it, but if you have a phone, you can take a photo of that or do the little thing to get that. And that's the citation for it. So that's where I'm coming from. And I just want to talk a little bit about thematic analysis and reflexive thematic analysis. These are two different things. Thematic analysis can have lots of different types of designs, including Braun and Clarke's design. But there are differences amongst the two. So, one of the big things is the philosophical foundations of it. So, thematic analysis is very generic. It's coding, reliable. It is rooted in more of a post-positivist paradigm. So, looking at things like objectivity, reliability, replicability, and it assumes that the data is all existing already within the themes are existing already within the data. Whereas reflexive thematic analysis or RTA, it is more interpretive or constructivist. So it often recognizes that the themes are constructed by the researcher, that the researcher is an instrument in this, the researcher is involved in bringing this out. Um, Typically, we might see things like a code book or multiple coders so that we can get coder reliability. Within thematic analysis, but reflexive thematic analysis may only have one researcher. It might have a team of researchers like what we did in the paper that I shared. It's also evolving and very flexible in the ways that it lays out. So a code book might not work because those codes may change as the process goes on. Again, the themes are either discovered or constructed, which is a huge difference. Reflexivity is minimal but important in thematic analysis, and it really is central in reflexive thematic analysis. They put it right in the name just for that. And the aim for thematic analysis is essentially to be consistent, to be reliable, whereas we're looking for depth and interpretation in RTA. So I think another important thing to know is that this idea of the timeline that happened here. So Braun and Clarke published their seminal paper in 2006, and this tends to be the paper that people rely on. And I caution you not to rely only on this paper. So like the method, this happened, or like the process, this method happened to evolve. So we see from 2006 until 2019 some pretty important things that happened. So so it started in 2006, but Braun and Clarke really were concerned about some of the misinterpretation that happened of their original method. And so they tended to put out webinars and other papers where they differentiated this method from other versions, their method from other versions, including things like it doesn't require multiple coders. So you can do this on your own. It doesn't rely on code books, reliability checks. And again, the importance of themes being constructed and not discovered. So it doesn't have to be something that comes directly from or very descriptive in nature, that there is a fair bit of interpretation that happens here. So in 2019, they formally changed the terminology. So reflexive thematic analysis is the name. And if you have a paper that you put out that says that you're using Braun and Clarke, Braun and Clarke's thematic analysis, and you use this 2006 and you don't reference the reflexivity or the reflexive in the name, I would really question that as a reviewer, and recently did in a graduate defense at York. So in which the person had been using reflexive thematic analysis, just was using the wrong citation, and that did have to be changed again before that could be finally submitted. So here is the citation to the 2019 paper, and that's a much better paper to use. It shows that you recognize the difference between what you're doing, and that that you are using reflexivity in what you are doing. So here's some of the core components or central ideas to reflexive thematic analysis. And right in the name, one of the things is that the researchers are reflexive. So, recognizing your space, who you are, what you bring to the data, um, and that you are not something to eliminate, but that your subjectivity is something that we're embracing in this. So your insight, your positionality in through this method are seen as valuable. You are a tool for making meaning of the data, and and this is in contrast to other methods that try to minimize the researcher influence for the sake of objectivity. This is not what we're wanting to do here. Hopefully you've gotten this idea that themes are constructed, not discovered. Themes just don't emerge out of thin air. They're actively created by the researcher, and we will go through that today. But the challenge is that themes aren't just in the data waiting to be found. You can't mine for them, you can't look for them, but instead that you are creating them. This is not a linear process. So we'll go through the 6 stages, but to recognize that this is recursive, that it's iterative, that you can go back and forth through these different steps, and that you should go back and forth through these steps and always refining as you go. And the final thing that I would mention is reflexivity, so that there is methodological flexibility. Did I say reflexivity? Flexibility. There's methodological flexibility here. So you can apply this across a range of different theoretical frames or philosophical perspectives. You can use this inductively from the bottom up or deductively where it's theory driven. It really depends on your goals and what you'd like to do. And to that point, even though it is flexible, I think that it's also important, especially within the context of graduate students, where you are likely being asked to apply a theoretical framework to your research, which sometimes is antithetical to qualitative research, but with reflexive thematic analysis, it absolutely is a benefit to anchor yourself to a theory. So you can be flexible, but also if you have a theory like feminist theory, intersectionality, critical social theory, to recognize this and to also allow it to shape your interpretation, to support the questions that you're going to be asking, to help you guide how you're going to ask those questions, who you're going to ask those questions to, and also to help you think about your reflexivity throughout the project. And again, reflexivity being something that's happening all across all of these different stages. So the process here that we're going to go through is Braun and Clarke's 6 steps. So these are the 6 steps, and and we start here with familiarizing yourself with the data, but I do want to recognize that this is not linear. So you may actually get almost to the end and realize, okay, I've defined all of the names and the themes, but now all of a sudden I'm coming back here and I need to go back through these codes and make sure that these are the right codes, they're the right codes to answer my questions, that I've got the enough data to be able to answer the questions. Or maybe you start coming to themes and realize that maybe the questions you asked weren't quite right, or as you started to code, maybe that wasn't where you should have been. And so you come back here to familiarize yourself with the data again, to reconsider what was there. You may even get to the end and produce a report, whether that's a paper or whatever you've been doing. You might get to the end there and realize that you need some more interviews. So Wherever you end is just fine, and you can go back and forth. And again, I mentioned that you should expect to go back and forth. I think it will result in less frustration later when you realize that you're not done just because you get to one of these steps in the stage. So the first thing I want to say is please, please, please just read the data. Just read the data, whether you are the person that did the interview or whether you're the person or whether somebody else did it and you're reading a transcript that somebody else has collected. Read the data. In a narrative study that I did an entire interview. And at the end of the interview, I didn't pick up on certain things that the woman that I was interviewing was talking about. And it wasn't until after I read the transcript that I put together, oh, her mother was related to this person and this person. And I could see where that was once I read the data. But if I had just assumed, I already know this, I've done this great interview with her, I know all of this intimately, don't make those types of assumptions. Just read the data. And if you could tell me, those of you that have already done some coding or some analysis, how often do you do this? Do you just read? And you can type in the chat if this is something, if it's part of your practice, yes or no, to just read the data before you do anything else. You're making my heart so happy. Multiple reads. Okay, can I also add, put the highlighter down because I know that you're saying yes to this, but some of you have a highlighter or a pen. Put the pen down, put the highlighter down, step aside, and make yourself as cozy as you would be if you were reading a good book. Um, just get familiar with it. I'm also going to say that this is kind of like we bought a car last week. We had to disown our Tesla, so we got a new car. And when we got a new car, we test drove the car. We didn't just go to the dealership, come home, and park the car in the driveway like we do with our car now. Um, no, we didn't do that. We took it out, we tested it around, we drove it around town. That's what you want to do. You want to become play with all the buttons. That's essentially what you want to do. You wouldn't just go buy a car, bring it home, park it in the driveway. It's just not what you would do. You would go test it out. You would sit in the back seat and see if there's enough leg room. So these are the types of ideas that you want to bring to this idea, familiarizing yourself with the data. After you have just read, and thank you very much for those of you that read and read it multiple times. I mean, do this safely and with all of the sensitivity that your data deserves. But take this with you. For those of you that are really, really busy, take it with you so that you can read this when you're waiting for your kids to have their swim lessons, and you can sit somewhere quietly and just go through and read it. When you're waiting for the train, like find somewhere that's safe and private where you can take this out and read it when you've got 5, 10 minutes. You don't have to block a large time period. You can read segments of this. So reread it. And then after you've done that, take some notes. So I think it's a good idea to just summarize what you got out of that one initial interview transcript, whether it's an interview, a focus group, whether it's a different type of document, but whatever your piece of work that you're analyzing is, summarize it. Summarize it. And I think that there's a few benefits to doing this. One is that then if you have a brief summary of what you took away as the main ideas to your that relate back to your question. And remember, I said before, you should have the question on the wall, like right in front of you. big paper, like get a huge piece of paper, stick it in the wall in front of you so that your research question is always at your mind. But one of the things that you can do with those summaries, if they're brief, is stick them into a PowerPoint like this. And at your next committee meeting, you can actually say, here's a summary of the data. And it helps the rest of your committee members to become more familiar with the data that you're providing. So I just think that that would be helpful. Keep your summaries short. They should be 1 or 2 paragraphs if you can, no longer than a page. Mhm. There we go. Generate some initial codes is the second step in this process. And essentially what you're doing here is labeling the data. So you're systematically labeling the data. This is something that's rigorous, that helps to put things into meaningful groups. Can you imagine if you had a cupboard full of spices and you didn't have any names on them? You could be using all the wrong things. Can you imagine using cinnamon instead of paprika? Like this would just ruin your recipe. So we really want to be mindful about coding things. It helps us to identify what something means. This is our smallest unit of analysis here. So essentially what we're doing is taking labels and putting that to your data text. Again, making sure that all of this is relevant to your research question. So there may be data that you have, and ultimately I imagine that there will be, probably by the end, a few pages in a transcript interview, for example, that really aren't relevant to your research question. And this often happens in focus groups as well, where somebody's kind of taken the group down a different path, and maybe you've allowed that to happen so that you can build some trust, you can get people comfortable, and then you bring them back to what your questions are, what you're there for, but what you're coding should be relevant. And this really helps us to be thoughtful about what we're coming up with. Okay, so what I've done here is created a bit of a transcript, a fake study, let's call it that, a faux study even. My research question that I bring to you is, how do graduate students perceive and manage the balance between their academic responsibilities and personal life? If I were to ask you that, please feel free to drop in the chats. How do you manage the balance between academic responsibilities? If you had to sum that up in one word, what would that word be? So the aim of this faux study is to explore, to understand the experiences of graduate students, to manage, yes, thank you, to manage their personal life, manage their work-life balance. Specifically, I want to identify the challenges that graduate students face, the strategies they employ, and the impact on their overall well-being. And someone said, what personal life? Yes. Yeah, and what's academic life? So here is the faux transcript, and I feel like what's coming out of the chat right now is also in line with this. But what I'm going to do is post this here for a moment, and what I'd like you to write in the chat are what statements here, what parts of the statement stand out to you, and how would you label them? So if you could take a few words, what word would you put to label that? So if we think about our spice cupboard again, my spice cupboard anyway just says turmeric, or it just says curry. It doesn't say that this is a smoky flavor, that it's a bit spicy, only use a little bit. It doesn't give the full details. It's just a quick label that tells me what something is about. So if I were to if I were to say this to you, um, what parts of this page do you think stand out? And I'll give you a moment to think about it. But please feel free to write this in. Yeah, so challenges. So challenges. So perhaps the part about it's really challenging. I try to create a schedule that balances, however, it's difficult to stick with. And maybe I only want to even put it's really challenging. That could be enough to be coded into it's really challenging because you could actually see that becoming a quote or something later. Um, and in Braun and Clarke's reflexive thematic analysis, they have what we call semantic and latent theme or latent codes and themes. But the semantic essentially means ones that are descriptive in nature, and latent means ones that are interpretive in nature. So some of this might be descriptive. It's really challenging. I try to schedule, I try to create a schedule that balances, blah, 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 blah. Maybe there's something about trying to balance time management, balancing. I love just even, that's a great, just the word balancing. I love any time that there's these ing words or what are called, I don't call them this, but they are called gerunds. So gerunds are those action words, the ing words. They come from grounded theory, and it's all, yeah, sacrificing. Great. And I'm sure that you are all feeling this so much. Lack of support, emotional toll, making sacrifices. These are all great ways to move into coding. And you've come up with lots. Here's another page of them. And you might even find that as we move through here, we're starting to see that some of these are coming together. Like, for example, network of support. Is that the same or different than lack of support? And is that the same or different um, as family commitments and family responsibilities? Or can we start to have, or can we start to have some of these combined? And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the show Seinfeld, but there is a very funny to me episode of Seinfeld where the contraceptive, the sponge, goes off the market. And Elaine is very distressed because this was her contraception device of choice. It was her favorite. And she finds a pharmacy where she buys out their entire stock and she has like 20 sponges. And she has to then decide if her suitors are sponge worthy before she uses her sponge. So I want you to think about Elaine and her sponge worthy suitors when you're developing codes. Is this code worthy? Is this piece of information that you have discussed, is that code worthy? Because what we don't want to end up with in the end are 100 codes. It's not helpful, it's not manageable. So really start to think about, can I have support here as a broader code? And then can I even have some sub codes here within, and if you have in vivo, I think they look at them as nodes and child's nodes. Um, there's different terminologies in different qualitative software. But could we just have support? And then could we look at family and look at the different ways in which we support people? I hope that's helpful. So that is around the coding. The next is around constructing themes, and this actually is not my analogy. This is from Braun and Clarke. Braun and Clarke talk about themes as as the sun. So the sun is the theme and the planets all circle around it. So a theme is something that brings together all of the codes. So if you think about the theme being the sun and the codes are all the planets orbiting around it. I also like Dr. Elizabeth Yardley, who is the degree doctor. Great follow. If you don't follow her on YouTube, great follow. She also talks about themes as being characters in a movie. So the main characters in a movie, they all have a point, they all affect the plot. They have their own story, their own dynamics. So they are the themes, and then they work together to create the movie. Um, so during this stage, what we want to do is to write the themes and to create their defining properties. So if we're talking about the sun or the solar system, we could talk about what that means. And I'm a nurse. I'm not at all this type of scientist, so I won't even try to do that. But we want to write what the theme is, and then what are all the things that you're including within this? And don't just use the names of the themes. Use your words as use sentences, use point forms, but try to define what it is that you're including within this. It helps to make meaning and build relationships between the initial codes that you've developed that you may go back and rename or rejig once you decide, okay, wait a minute, I really do need to separate support because there's a big difference between what's happening in family, friends, and academics. So these types of supports are very different. Or maybe I just want to go, okay, these are helpful supports and these are not helpful supports, and really look at the dichotomy there. But themes zoom out. So with codes, we were really, really close, looking directly at, again, those smallest units. So if we were looking at the leaf, whenever we were looking at the codes, when we zoom out, we're now going to be looking at the whole forest. So themes are what puts all of the codes together. Codes are small, and then you zoom out and look at the bigger picture. How are you feeling about theming with me? In my head, you're saying, Karen, we would love to theme with you. So let's try this. Okay. So if I had these three codes, what would be a theme? What would draw these three things together? And just for reference, this is a picture of a picnic, a picture of a card, and a picture of a pool. So we have picnic, card, and pool. Oh, nice. Self-care. Very good. This is new. This is not at all related to the other faux study that I created. Hobbies, joy, leisure, health. What if I did it this way? If I actually were to type these words into the chat, picnic, card, and pool, tell me what these three words have in common. And this is actually a child's game. Um, this is so good. Okay, so just for anybody that's watching this later, here's some of the words that have come up: hobbies, joy, leisure, health, community, activity, grateful, pool party, invitation. You are all such grand thinkers. So good. If we were to bring this to a grade 3 class, they might say that picnic, card, and pool, what they have in common is table. So picnic table, card table, pool table. So just different ways to think about it. Nothing is right or wrong here, but this is how the game goes. It's maybe not this fun, I don't know, when you're actually doing it yourself. Although I highly recommend that you take your codes, and now I wish I had put the picture of when I did this myself. I put my codes onto index cards and named each one of them. And then I brought it, we happened to be on the campus hub. That's besides the point. But we all sat together, a group of graduate students and one of our supervisors with us. And what we did was we moved all these cards around the table to go, okay, wait a minute, that doesn't go here. And look, if we actually put this here, this flows into this. So we could actually start even diagramming and drawing these diagrams together. So this is just one way. Okay, so if we think of this next one, these three words, earth, inch, and book. Earth, inch, and book. What do these three things, if we were to theme these three words, what would we theme them together? What do they have in common? This is how I can tell I'm working with graduate students. Thank you so much. Okay, so if we're graduate students, maybe we would think about knowledge or measurement. These are great themes as well. And I hope that you take from this that there is not one way to theme this. And again, when we talked about the semantic versus the latent, so semantic being the descriptive and latent being the interpretive, you all are very interpretive. So if we're thinking about exploring measurement, I think that those are more of that interpretive, like you're already getting to those further interpretive places. But if I were in grade 3 and I was looking for the connection word between this, I might say worm. So bookworm, earthworm, inchworm. Okay, my final one. Um, and I put this one just to show that they don't also have to be single words. So we've been using single words largely for these ones because it's a game for children. But I hope that you get the point that it brings together these codes. We're finding ways to put these codes together. Interesting. So the three words here are bowling, donuts, and Swiss cheese, I believe, were the three words. Yeah, so circles, balls. I actually was thinking things with holes. So things with holes might be, yeah, thank you. Things with holes might be, there were some on this list that I just could not ever see what the connection between them was. So, whoops. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this. And the point is that, yeah, really, I could say for this, these are all things that I personally cannot eat. I have a dairy allergy, so I can't eat anything on this list. If that was answering my research question, that would that would perhaps be if the question was, what can Karen eat? These are things Karen can't eat. Um, yeah, so one of the comments here is, I'm not going to say your name just because I don't have permission while it's in the recording, but we can talk more after. But one of the comments here is coding also seems like a protective technique you draw from your own experiences. Absolutely. And this is the really important thing about why you're using Braun and Clarke's RTA instead of thematic analysis, because you're leaning into that piece of I am a researcher. And if that's not good for you, step back and use a different type of don't use Braun and Clarke. Don't use their 2006 because that was always intended to be reflexive. It just got lost through other types of reflexivity that went on. So if you're not planning to draw from your own experience, from your knowledge, if that's not something that works for you and your supervisor, use a different method for sure. Okay, so now that we've come to the themes, and we're doing this way faster than you'll actually do it in real life, we're going to review the potential themes. And this is probably what you're going to look like. You are going to be frustrated at this point. Maybe you'll be excited and frustrated at different times. But you want to make sure, you want to go back and make sure that there's enough data to support the theme. If there's not enough data to support the theme, you have some options. You can go back into the field and do some more interviews until you find enough data that you can. Or maybe you relook at, was that a theme? Did that code belong somewhere else? Was there somewhere better to put that code? So this is where you're going to start to put some of these themes together. So we talked about the first theme that we did about the picnic and the card and the pool, that was a party. And the last one, the things with holes. So we had the first one was table and the last one was things with holes. And we could actually put those two together and go, okay, it actually wasn't things with holes or tables. It actually was about parties. Like this was about celebrations, and we can create a whole new theme and collapse those in together. Because again, you're going to have a certain number of codes, maybe not too many, and then you're going to have even less themes. So themes, we're really talking about maybe 4 to 6 themes. Maybe you have an overarching theme of celebrations, and then you have parties, food for parties. Those could be your themes within that. Um, and the actual number I don't want to give you because that is really going to be determined by you and by what your data is telling you. So, what does the data give you permission to do? That's how many themes and codes you're going to have, but don't do too many. Okay, this is actually from our paper, the one that I shared at the top at the beginning of the hour, and these were some of our codes, and what we started to do was to literally write these out on an old school chalkboard. And something magic happens when you use chalk in a chalkboard. So highly recommend go find a room at York that has a chalkboard and pick up the chalk, because it's so easy to erase things, to put things together, and to show, okay, wait a minute, there's a relationship here. What is the relationship? What does it look like? And what can I do? What was the goal of this? And how, like, wait, these things all overlap, but do they overlap this way, or do they overlap in more of a linear way where only this person is interacting with these two? So different ways to look at that. I do think that during this time of refining your themes, it's a good time to go through this and start to develop some diagrams to see where things come together. And diagramming is a really good way to do this. And you can use something as simple as some of the smart art in PowerPoint. You can just draw things. You can put pieces of text together, whatever works for you. So I actually really like using PowerPoint at this point in the process to put things together, or just drawing on pieces of paper. Okay, we're going to come into the next one where we are now going to define, we're going to define and name the themes. So in each of these themes, we really want to be able to have a broader story. So each theme should respond to the research question, and it should also tell its own story and its own story within the broader story. We're going to be cycling between the data and the themes in order to organize that story at this time. Um, and naming the themes should be something that that helps us to have a bigger picture. So you used words like measurement, celebrations, birthday party when you were originally coming up with themes. And now that we're redefining and we've got more of the story of those themes, we're going to start to think about, is there is there more of a brief phrase, and it might just be a single word, but is there a brief phrase that we could use that gives us more of an interpretive lens to this, more than just description? It gives us a little bit more about what we're going to read. So think about a book that you're going to pick up. Um, you the title of it should be inviting, and that's what we're looking for. So, if you will, bear with me one more time, and this might be the hardest ask of all, but I have found some paint colors. And these paint colors are called, and imagine these are what we're putting together into renaming our theme. So we've got grandma's refrigerator, hot chocolate, and a warm blanket on a cold winter day, and puppy paws. These are the names of these paint colors. We're no longer we're not looking for what they have in common. We're looking at how would we name this. So now is your space to be as creative as you possibly would like to be. What would you name something that would tell you a story about grandma's refrigerator, hot chocolate, and puppy paws? Is there a brief phrase that you could come up with that would give us some, right, comfort. I love the idea of comfort. And we can even, if we step away from the colors, I just like to point out that Benjamin Moore and all of the rest of the people come up with the greatest names. Um, and I hope that you use it with some type of inspiration, but memory and association, or maybe we would even say warm memories, comforting memories, childhood, remembering childhood comforts. So we could come up with some sort of, oh, I love this, where comfort lives or warmth wrapped in a memory. So beautiful. Like if I might use that in a future, if you don't mind, I might use that in future. But I love that idea, warmth wrapped in a memory. So it gives us kind of this emotive phrase that tells you what kind of gives you a sense of what story I'm about to read in this theme. Okay, here's another one. Dog's ear, sorry, secret rendezvous, hamster cuddles, and my favorite is not enough chocolate syrup, Mom. Is there a sense of what would these words? I'm going to write about this. I'm going to write about dog's ears, about secret rendezvous, about hamster cuddles, and not enough chocolate syrup, Mom. I'm already starting adolescence. Oh, that's really interesting. So, and if you were going to break out adolescence into a phrase that kind of now gives us not just a code, because maybe we've coded things as adolescents, but now we want to start to push that into more what does it tell us? Yeah, intimacy during adolescence. I don't know if that's, I mean, okay, let's be honest, we're all academics here. So yeah, intimacy happens in adolescence. Absolutely. Um, and there's something between not enough chocolate syrup and secret rendezvous that to me scream for abundance. Um, and so I don't know if there's something like leaning into abundance, accepting intimacy, accepting your desires. Whatever that is, roller coaster, roller coaster of emotions, roller coaster of comforts, whatever that is, see if you, okay, I feel like somebody in this room is absolutely a poet, but the magic in little things. I feel like you have a really strong gift here in coming up with these themes. So when you think about that, I can't do better than that myself. The magic in the little things. So does that associate with each of these? Yeah, absolutely. You can start to think the magic in getting a really perfect mix of chocolate milk when you put the Nesquik in. Absolutely. Like there's magic that's associated with your mom getting that right on the very first time of having your little hamster cuddle in close to you, of scratching your dog's ears, or being a dog and having your ear scratched. And definitely with secret rendezvous. I love that. Okay, and I make this sound really easy. The final is writing the report. So you want your report to be written probably at this speed. You want your report to be beyond descriptive. So beyond the semantic, we want to move into the interpretive lens. So again, moving from a place where we're saying something like measurement into the magic of the moment. So we're moving into those broader kind of terms. So we don't need to use the word measurement because that was just a code that helped us to label something, that helped us to organize our spice cabinet. It helped us to organize that smallest unit of analysis. And now we want to really pull out and be at that broader level. The report should also be coherent, it should be concise, should be logical. You don't want it to be repetitive. So you don't want it to be repetitive around the data that you use and across the themes. So if you're using magic, the magic of the moment, you're going to only use the magic quotes in there. So we don't want to have something very similar. We don't want to have the same quote used twice, period, full stop. Um, and what we don't want is to see repetitive codes coming out. We want this to be at that larger level of the themes, and we want it to be interpretive. It's not easy, so it will take you time. It will take you time to do, and please lean in onto your supervisors and your graduate committee. Um, to be able to help you do this work, to give you some sense of where you're going and what you might be using. So give them like, this is my theme. These are the properties that I decided were that I constructed to be within that. And this is how I'm thinking I'm going to lay it out so that you've got that just that again, that one slide that you can share with them in a committee meeting where you say, here's what the theme is. This is why it's that way. Here's a couple of quotes, or here's one or two quotes that I might use within here, and here's what I'm going to talk about. That way, you're already setting your outline so that you absolutely can move forward with that. Finally, if I can leave you with a few tips for success, I would say that you need to practice reflexivity if you're going to do reflexive thematic analysis. It's right in the name. So practice throughout. So it's not just something that you're doing at the front where you, at the beginning of your study, where you say, okay, I live in a place of privilege that I just bought a new car on the weekend. I live in a place of privilege that I am a white woman working at a higher education institution. Um, Beyond that, that's great. So set that up at the beginning and then continue to move through that. So if you're using, for example, disability and crip theory, maybe you start to think about what are the ways that I interact with society? What are the ways that I interact in making this world a harder place for people who are disabled to live? So I start to then use part of my thematic, or sorry, my theoretical framework and integrate that into what I'm learning, what I'm doing. And I think that another important thing to think about is getting intimate with the data. So throughout all of these stages, even when you've now like you're well into coding, it's not a bad thing to go back and even read the summaries of what you had initially wrote when you read without a highlighter, without a pen, you just read. And then you summarized. And in those summaries, go back and reread them. And if there's something that stands out to you now that you've gone through and you're at step 5, go back and say, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to read this whole transcript again, read it from the start, so that you'll be able to say, I know that in participant 7, there's a quote about this. I know that this person, I know that somebody talked about this, and I'm going to be able to go back and find it. Be flexible with everything, because flexibility is key. Being flexible to step away whenever you need to step away. Um, be really mindful about, this is a very good point. Be very mindful about the things that we want to see, what we want to say versus what's actually in the data. So what does the data give you permission to say? What story is the data giving you permission to tell? It's not about us, it's us generating that and putting everything together. But it has to come from somewhere and it needs to be grounded. Stay organized in order to be able to do that. So have write down everything. Write down everything. If you keep where however and wherever you do it, if you do it by voice memos, if you do it in a journal, I probably have a stack of journals everywhere around my office right now. If you could see any lower than this, you would see probably 7 or 8 journals within this space. Write things down, and you do it on the computer if you prefer to do it on the computer. Again, I love PowerPoint. Ask questions and be curious. And to that end, I am going to ask you, what are your questions and what are your curiosities? Thank you so much for listening and for thank you so much for listening and for being part of my games.